No, we should be good. Okay. All right. This is 107, so we can go ahead and get
Yes,
started.
yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you everyone so much for coming to our medical school application workshop. We are very grateful that you decided to take time out of your weekend to join us. My name is Ali Ashrafuddin. I am part of the UTD AMWPA chapter and will be helping with this application workshop to help you all get started with some of the essentials. Whether you're applying this upcoming cycle or the next one, you will have something beneficial to gain for sure, inshallah. And just as a reminder, questions will be answered in a Q&A session at the very end. So if you do have something, feel free to put it in the chat, but we will leave time at the end to answer those. All right, so just to explain a little bit more about AMWPA, that stands for the American Muslim Women's Physician Association, and we are an organization aiming to improve women's health, provide a platform for us in medicine, and raise awareness about issues in the community. We have a very strong emphasis on preventative medicine, as seen through our health fairs, as we like to promote health issues and make sure that women are advanced in both medicine, education, and general leadership roles. Now we will have one of our panelists, Stephanie, lead us in a quick dua.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a fourth year medical student at TCOM. I just matched IM at UTMB in Galveston. So, and if anyone wants to go collect seashells in the next 3 years, I'm available. All right. So I wanted to just recite Surat An-Nas because I actually recite it anytime I used to have self-doubt or anytime I just feel like the world is kind of all going to crumble down. It is a prayer of protection. I'll explain a little bit more after. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسواس الناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. So in the surah you hear like it's you're seeking refuge from evil, from the whispers, but I think in medical school we can kind of be our own worst enemy and comparing ourselves to others, that self-doubt, self-talk that is negative. So I would recite Surah Nas before every single exam, and that was all through undergrad, all through AP exams. That Surah Nas got me through a push exam. Like I've been saying this for years, and I do truly believe that it has powered me because it kind of reminds us, we ask for that protection because we're not alone. No matter what you're going through, what you're fighting, there's always a higher power that is guiding you and protecting you. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a very insightful reflection, and we for sure, like as undergrad students, can relate to that pressure, especially when reaching towards medical school. It is a lot of hurdles. So thank you so much, Stephanie. Jazakallah khair for that meaningful introduction to our program. All right, now to introduce our speakers, we do have a lot of medical students that will provide gems for us, inshallah, some from UT Southwestern and from TCOM of various years. If we could just go quickly in order, you all can introduce yourself, maybe include a little fun fact.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ahmed Abdi. I'm at UT Southwestern. I'm a second year. It's nice to see everyone. I see some familiar faces. I used to teach some of you in general chemistry, PLTL. No, Alia used to be my student. So I guess that can be a fun fact.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Sana. I also went to UTD, although I did not know Ahmed at the time. And I'm actually from Austin. So.
Salam everyone, my name is Layal. I also went to UTD, didn't know Sana or Ahmed before. And I guess my fun fact is that I have been in like the DFW for like high school, undergrad, and now med school.
Hey guys, Stephanie here again. I'm an MS4 at TCOM. I went to UT Arlington, so if there's any Mavericks out there, I know a lot of information that can help you. And I guess my fun fact is I really love gardening. I kind of grew up doing it. I'm descended from farmers. And so if you guys want fig trees, mint, peach, pear, plants are like patients. So it's kind of fun to treat them.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Dana. I also went to UTD for undergrad.
also didn't know any of these people. I'm in TCOM now. I'm a first year, and I guess my fun fact is, even though I want to do infectious disease, my favorite movie is Ratatouille, which is like a little hypocritical.
Yeah, hopefully we all can get to know each other as part of the AMWPA organization. So it will be amazing. You can also reach out to any of these med students if you do have any questions afterwards. All right, so just to go over a quick overview of what you can expect when applying to medical school, it generally does start a little over a year before you actually matriculate. So, for example, if you are trying to join medical school in fall of 2026, you would be applying a little bit over a year. So, in May 2025. So that's just a frame of reference, especially for this application cycle. That's what it applies to. Starting off with your junior year, in the winter, you want to focus on starting to look into the process. So, taking your MCAT, which is the standardized test that you need to get into medical school, along with your other extracurriculars. Then in the spring of your junior year, you will actually capitalize on this, take all your standardized exams. The MCAT is necessary. The Casper and the Duet tests are extra tests that some medical schools may require, so you should look into those, especially if you're trying to go to schools that need them. I know a lot of Texas schools do. Then you also want to look at letters of recommendation. So making sure to ask your professors about those well ahead of time is very important, so they have enough time to write about you and your characteristics. Finally, you want to create your school list, know where you're applying, so you can also brush up on your personal statement. Then in May and August, that summer, before a year before you apply, you want to start submitting your applications. There is the primary application, which will have your main personal statement essays. After you submit that, you will receive the secondary applications, which are some extra essay schools may require, and they can be school specific. Finally, after both those rounds are submitted, you will be in the interview stage where medical schools will reach out asking for that, and you can prepare for those by doing mock interview prep throughout the year. And if any of the panelists want to add on any key tips or steps involved or how you approached your own timeline.
I think you nailed it.
All right, then we can go ahead on to the next application service. So there are three main application services in general. The first one is called TMD SAS. This applies to all Texas medical schools except TCU and UIW. The next application service is AMCAS. So this is what most medical schools in the United States use other than Texas. So if you are looking to apply out of state, you will want to know the service. The third one is AA-COMAS, which is for DO schools. All right, so looking specifically into the application components, which will be covered in great detail throughout this presentation, this is just an overview. So the primary application consists of your main essay called the personal statement. Now, this is the essay that will talk about why you want to do medicine. It is considered to me one of the most important parts of your application, and this essay really is what would make you shine. Then you have your work and activities section. So you will cover everything that you did in undergrad, and that includes your leadership, your clinical experiences, your research, and you can do up to 15. It's very good to represent yourself in the best light by having good descriptions for this, which we will talk about. There are also letters of recommendation. So these can be from your professors, doctors you worked with, research PIs, or anyone that can really vouch for your skills and how you work with people. Some schools may offer a committee letter if you have that service available, which will be done by your health application advisor committee. Or the other option is getting individual letters from those people I talked about earlier. Finally, you want to have a good MCAT score and GPA. It's nice to keep those pretty high. That just comes with a lot of hard work studying. And if you need any tips or help, you can always refer to upperclassmen or even our AMWPA YouTube channel. The next component are the secondaries. So the primary application is the first thing that gets submitted. After it is verified by medical schools, you will receive a secondary later on. These are school-specific essays. You can expect about 3 to 5 per school, and they will just be short ones that you want to write in a quick time frame, ideally within 2 weeks. And after that is when schools will start to consider you more heavily. Finally, you have interviews, and there are multiple formats for these. You have the traditional format. There's also a format called the MMI. This stands for multiple mini interviews, so it'll just be quick rounds of questions. Finally, you have group interviews. So this could be an activity with a group, just to see how you interact with people. And medical schools really do gauge on your behavior in these. And so if any of the panelists want to add on any specifics or, personal encounters.
Yeah, I think I can add something to the secondaries. So with secondaries, because Alia said the turnaround is so short, 2 weeks, and then I don't think people meant know this, but when you send out your primary application goes to all the schools, they usually come all at you at the same time. So you apply to 15 schools, you're going to get 15 times 5 essays, right? So what I recommend, which I personally didn't do, but I wish I did, was that you can pre-write your secondaries. So pre-write means that usually the topics are usually the same. Usually one or two might change. So you go on Google, you type in whatever school you want, you type in secondaries, and usually on SDN, Student Doctor Network. Most of you are probably familiar with that. They'll have a form where they have all the previous year's questions. So you pre-write your essays. So then when the time comes and you get the essay, all you have to do is maybe tweak it for like the word count might have changed or something like that. And it'll save you a lot of stress because those 2 week, the turnaround time, I was working like all night, all day trying to get like hundreds of essays done. And back then I didn't have ChatGPT to help me cut down, word counts. So I was doing this all manually. So this was like a very tough time in my application process.
Yeah, another thing I'll say, I agree with what Ahmed says, and I definitely did pre-write, but it sounds really overwhelming when you think of it as like multiple essays per school, and they're also school specific. But really, you'll notice this like when you actually look at the prompts, but they're kind of similar and you can use like similar answers. You just like have to tweak them a little bit. So have like a few pre-written, and then you can kind of add or change things depending on like the school and how the prompt changes.
And then I also wanted to add that I can't say for schools outside of Texas because I didn't apply outside of Texas, but I think there are 2 or 3 that have video secondaries. So I think that would be like TCU, UTMB, not sure about others, but and then there's some that don't have secondaries at all too.
This is me. All right, guys. GPA and academics, which is kind of a daunting task because this is really the full 4 years. And I know that for some of you that are maybe in your first year of college and maybe you didn't have very intense science courses, maybe your AP Chem class was taught by a gym teacher who never took chemistry in their life that has a master's in therapy. These are the kinds of things that happen in public school in Texas. So, I mean, that happened to me and I had to kind of beat that wave. The thing I will say is if you are in the beginning of your academics and you're feeling like you're hitting that wall, or if you're near the end and you have some maybe I guess some learning curves in your application, like you got maybe a few B's your first year of undergrad, and you're worried. This is the part where you not only learn how to get good grades, but also how to make your application work for you. So this is for the people that have straight A's and also the people that are about to apply and maybe they don't have a perfect GPA. So for those that are just starting out, we wanted to talk about choosing a major. This is a little controversial. I'm on the traditional side of choose a science major, something that will cover most of your classes, especially in a day and age where I guess I will say school isn't as cheap as it used to be, and you really want to make use of that time and the money that you're spending. So I personally was a bio major, and then I actually fell in love with chemistry, and I ended up kind of going dual. And all that extra chemistry helped because guess what's now on the MCAT? At least a little bit, biochem 2. So I will say, if you are, thinking about what classes to take your sophomore year, junior year, look at what's actually on the MCAT and make sure you have a good foundation in those courses before you take the MCAT. Because I will say, like, in terms of my MCAT study, because I was really, really rigorous in my academics, like I didn't do anything first year except study, which is also controversial. Some people want to jump into organizations, leadership. I will say, if you want to feel stable, just focus on your grades in that first year. Maybe do a few volunteer events here and there so that you can get a feel for, life in healthcare, like go to a health fair through AMWPA. We only do one per month, so it's not too big a commitment. But don't overwhelm yourself with extracurriculars to, I guess, enhance your application at the detriment to your academics, because at the end of the day, those GPA cutoffs will determine if you're in a first tier, second tier, or third tier for applicants. And then within those tiers, that's where you're considered holistically. So and that's different for different schools. Do your research, find out what your targeted science GPA is, what your targeted cumulative GPA is. So yeah, this is, a big scary thing, GPA and academics. So just do your research. If you know that your dream school has a higher GPA than your own, look at your application and see how you can enhance it. One thing I will also say is I'm a proponent of GPA boosters. I had quite a few friends that had, I guess, rough, like first and second years. Everyone gets smacked in the face by organic chemistry. That happens. There are some labs where only one student gets an A. There's some stupid systems that exist. And the way we can counteract that is by taking, I did a few electives just also for fun. I did a full 2 years of language. I had never learned how to read and write Arabic as a kid, so that was fun to get to learn in college. And then also personal finance electives, highly recommend those just for yourself and your own knowledge. I even did some creative writing classes just for fun, for stress relief. So yeah, if you're able to, put in some of those softer classes also for your mental health, but also to balance yourself out. One big thing I see is people taking physics 2, organic 2, bio 2, and anatomy. People load up their schedules and then they end up dropping a class because it's too intense. So it's okay to know your own limits and to plan accordingly. Like, you don't need to be like the most intense applicant. You need to be the most well-rounded and balanced applicant if you want to be a good physician down the line. So yeah, don't sacrifice your grades for anything. Work smarter, not harder, which I know we're all working really hard, but we don't want to burn out while we're in undergrad. That's it. If you guys have any questions, feel free. I know it's a big topic.
All right, this is me. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We start all things in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, and we send our salams to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Peace and blessings be upon him. So my name is Ahmed. Like I said, I'll be talking about the MCAT. I want to talk about one thing that Stephanie mentioned, which I think is super, super important. And it's this topic of pretty much buffering your grades. So you want to work, like Stephanie said, really hard in the beginning because you have no idea how college works. You don't know, you could take this in a macro and micro level. So micro level is talking about one class. Let's say you start general chemistry. You don't know how the first exam is going to be. You don't know if it's going to be super hard or super easy. So you want to try your hardest. You want to do all the extra credit you can do, and your friends might be partying, having fun, but you just work really hard. So what will happen is that, let's say you do super well your first few exams, that'll give you a buffer if anything bad happens later in the semester. Let's say you forget an assignment, you do bad on an exam. It allows you to have a buffer where you can still do well in your class. The same thing goes on a macro level. When you try really hard your first 2 years, it allows you a little bit of slack and a little bit more relief in your junior and senior year. So like for me, I worked really hard to keep a good GPA. I took my MCAT early, so I had a level of relief and I had a lot of fun during my last 2 years. And it gave me that space of not only relief, but if something did happen, it wouldn't ruin my grade. Okay, so just want to add that. So now we'll jump onto the MCAT, which is notoriously one of the hardest entrance exams, I would say, in the world. I don't know, maybe the Indian medical entrance exam is a little bit harder, but so the first question is, when do you want to take it? Okay, so the first thing I'll say is that if you plan to take a gap year, just add one more year to whatever I'm saying in terms of timeline. So you want to take all your science prereqs first. So the science sections, so there's cars, which is English, which is not really, you don't have a prereq for that, but you have chemistry, physics section, which is your both your gen chems, both your OChems, and biochemistry one. There might be a little bit of biochemistry too. And of course, you have your biology section, which is also biochem, biology, and then you have your psychology and sociology sections. Okay. So I think you should start studying for the MCAT once you're done with everything, but there's three exceptions, right? These three courses, you can self-study yourself and still do very well on the MCAT. I know multiple people that have done it, and I did it myself. Number one, biochemistry. Number two, psychology. And number three, sociology. I don't know if it's the same, but back in my day at UT Dallas was probably, I took biochem probably three and some change years ago. The first biochem one wasn't that helpful when it comes to the MCAT. That was the consensus. So I said, okay, might as well just take it without taking biochem. Okay. Um, Also, number two, a very big important point I want to make is that you should take the exam at a time where you think, like, let's say the exam doesn't go where you want it to, and you have to retake, that you have enough time to retake without taking a gap year. So if you were to take the exam super close to your TMDSAS release date, which is around May, and then you get your score back after a month and it's not what you wanted, now either you're going to have to apply with a score that's bad and risk not getting in the first time, or you're going to have to take a whole other gap year, which causes its own issues, right? So always have that buffer of maybe a few months where if I would need to take a retake, you would be able to, okay? And then number three is you want to take it when you're comfortable with your full length scores. So full lengths are basically AMC, they release, I'll talk about this later. You take your practice exams, you average them out, and people say about plus or minus 2 points, that's what you're going to get around on the real thing. And then if it's possible, create that buffer. So for me personally, I was scoring pretty well on my exams, but literally the week up to my exam, some personal issues happened in my family, like the test day, a bunch of stuff went down. So my score actually dropped 4 points, but because I studied super hard, that score was still pretty good and I was happy with it. That's if it's possible. I know it's not always possible to do that. Another thing I want to add is kind of give an idea of including when to take it. What a lot of people do, what not a lot of people do, but what I did, and people do this, is that they take it the summer after their sophomore year. So you'll have 3 months and you basically study those 3 months full time and take it in August. So right before your junior year. That's what I did. And this allows you, number one, if you do really well on your exam, you're pretty much chilling for the next 2 years. Or if you don't do as well, you can use that semester and this winter break to study, and then you can just take it in January. Another time people take it is that they study the first semester of their junior year, use winter break, and then take it in the beginning of their second semester around January, February. Other people, they start in winter break and they use some, like around half of their second semester, and they take it there. So it just depends on what you think is better for you. Do you like studying more full time? Are you okay with studying with school? Knowing me, I knew I couldn't study with classes. So that's why I decided to go to take it earlier than usual. Okay, so how do you study for it? So this itself could be an entire class itself. So I won't spend too much time on it. I'll give like a general overview. So you want to break it up into three parts. So I studied for the MCAT for 3 months. So 1 month, 1 month, 1 month. If you study for 6 months, you just do 2 months each. Okay. So the first phase is going to be content review. Okay, this is when you're reviewing all your stuff or learning the stuff from a book or from videos. So you would use your Kaplan books, that which I liked. I think Princeton was a little bit too hefty. I think Kaplan was fine. Your Kaplan books, Jack Weston, which is like these passages you can do every day, like a few cars passages a day, and Khan Academy for your psychology and sociology. They have a very good video playlist, and that's what I used. Your second month, you're going to want to do third-party practice materials, right? So you're going to want to do UWorld, which is a question bank. And then on the weekends, you're going to want to take practice exams. And I personally use a Blueprint practice exams, okay? Third month, which is your last month, is you want to start your official practice material, which is through the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges. They're the people who run AMCAS and they write the MCAT, right? And all that material is going to be the most like your real thing, right? So you want to focus that last month onto the AMC with your highest yield material being number one, the full length exams. Number two being, I think they call the section banks. And all this stuff is extremely expensive. So either number one, you want to save up for it, ask your parents for some money, or I think apply for the AMC fee assistance program. This is personally what I did, and it saved me a lot of money. Even if you don't think you qualify for it, I would look into it because it is quite generous on the like amount of people they give it to. So I applied for it, and it gave me the MCAT was for free. The AMC bundle, like all the practice exams, all the practice questions, they were all for free. 20 free applications on the AMCAS, free secondaries, and they give you something called MSAR, which I'll talk about next. So look into that because it is quite an expensive thing. Or you can also get things secondhand. So now another thing people ask me is what score I should aim for. So this is there's a lot of factors that go into this, but I searched up, if you just search up TMDSAS or AMCAS, whatever you want, average matriculant data. Matriculant means someone that's got into medical school. That's kind of the scores you want to look at. You don't want to look at somebody that hasn't gone into medical school, right? You want to look at that. So you just search that up, and they have this database, and you can put different filters on it, like if you're a Texas resident, MCAT, GPA, reapplicant, whatever. So I just put a very basic for TMDACS, the average MCAT for the entering year of 2024. So this past class is 511.5. And this is, of course, without accounting other factors like GPA, where you live, your reapplicant. Some people consider ethnicity, things like that, to be a factor as well. So what I tell people to aim for, this is my personal opinion from what I've seen, is that you should aim for a 515. 515 is a safe score where I personally think if everything else is fine in your application, I think you'll get into medical school. Like I have never seen anyone with this score not get in, and it's not something that's too unachievable. I have seen like literally like 30 plus people, like a bunch of people get this score. And if you don't get that, that's completely fine. People get this score, lower than this score, higher than this score. I just think it's a safe score to aim for. Okay. And this is also dependent. I think Stephanie talked about this as well, was depends on where you want to go. If you know you want to go to a huge academic medical center that's like top 10 in the nation, you're gonna want to aim a little bit higher, right? And then there's this thing called the AMC MSTAR database. Again, it's another like money grab. It's $50. Like, why is it $50? I don't know. It's like this is stuff you can find online. Anyways, but it's really helpful. But pretty much all the MD schools in the nation, it gives them like what their average GPA, their median MCAT, things like that. You can split it with a friend, or if you have the AMC fee assistance program, you can go ahead with that. But overall, my advice for those are for the MCAT is just try to aim as high as you can. As Muslims, we believe in ihsan, excellence. So you want to try the best you can, and whatever score you get, that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So your job is just to try the hardest you can and leave nothing left on the table. So that's for the MCAT, inshallah. If you have any questions, we'll answer them at the end.
So I'm going to be talking about extracurricular activities, but specifically clinical activities. I think this is something people kind of miss or like don't end up doing, because I think a lot of people volunteer, but you need to know that you need also very clinically specific volunteer or hours, and that is going to include clinical experiences and shadowing. So I've listed some options that you can look into for getting clinical experience. I will acknowledge that it's hard to get clinical experience as an undergraduate, so really take whatever you can get. However, having said that, if you're kind of earlier in your undergraduate career and you have more options, I personally would recommend doing something where you have more kind of direct interaction with patients. So I was an EMT, and I didn't really want to do scribing because you definitely learn a lot, but it essentially ends up being kind of like shadowing a doctor where you're taking notes for them. And I wanted to be more involved in patient care. And so being an EMT allowed me to do that. And I was also able to write about that in my applications because out of, I think, all of these things, it gives you the most autonomy in kind of making decisions. And I was able to write about how like I kind of know what it is like to be like in the shoes of a physician. And yeah, so again, any of these, I know it's hard to get them, so any of these should be fine. Really, the goal of that is to show that you have experience in healthcare and you thrive in those situations. So the other things would be like medical assisting, patient care tech, and volunteering at a free clinic. That's something I didn't know, but we do have free clinics in the Dallas area. If anyone has questions, I volunteer at one, and there's undergraduate students who come as well. So ask me about that if you're interested. The other thing is shadowing. I definitely had a hard time finding someone to shadow, especially if you don't know people who are physicians. But and it can also be kind of awkward asking for kind of a favor, but really that's the way you're going to build connection. So do not be afraid to reach out to family or friends who are in healthcare. The other great thing is AMPA has mentors who are more than happy to have students shadow them. So if you don't know anyone personally, like that would be a great network to reach out to. And then worst comes to worst, you can always cold email physicians. I did that, but I was not very strategic about it. I would really recommend reaching out to physicians who work kind of in a teaching hospital because they're used to having students come shadow them. So UT Southwestern, for example, would be on that list, and you can reach out to physicians there. The other thing I would say about shadowing in general is don't kind of limit yourself to a specialty, especially if you're already having a hard time finding a physician to shadow. They're really not in my application. I mostly shadowed cardiologists, but I was never really asked, why I shadowed a cardiologist versus any other specialty. And most people, I think, have access to family physicians, but they kind of shy away from shadowing that because maybe that's like not the specialty they want to do or for some other reasons. But the goal with shadowing is like, yes, you get to see healthcare, but at the end, you want to get a rec letter from whoever you shadow. So just pick someone who can speak really well about you and who you can build a connection with. So after that, maybe 1 or 2 days of shadowing, you want to keep up with that physician. Like send them updates, like maybe however often you want about like what you're doing in undergrad, how things are going, so that when it comes to the time to ask for a rec letter, they know what to write about you. And then obviously when you show up to shadow, be interested and ask questions. But yeah, that's kind of it for clinical experience in shadowing. Let me know if anyone has questions.
Can I add one more clinical extracurricular activity that I think is super underrated, but it's like very, very highly looked at in medical schools? It's called hospice volunteering. It's very low stakes. I think a local one, if you're from UTD, just search up Pathway Hospice. That's the one I worked with. All my friends worked in that one. You get paired with like a single person. You have to go see them like once a week for maybe 2 hours and just like help, like, just sit with them. You don't do anything. You don't like take care of their, like, wipe them or do anything like a nurse would do. You just sit there and spend time with them, and you create like an insanely good patient interaction. And it was my most meaningful. I talked about in my personal statement. And you build like, and then usually because they're in hospice, you see someone from like the beginning to the end of their life. So it's very, very a strong, like very strong indicator to medical schools that you are a humanistic person, and it's not make a very good not only interaction with them but with their family as well. So you guys should check out hospice. A very low stakes, like 2-3 hours per week. So you guys should check that.
Yeah, and nursing homes also come into that category. That's what I did. But like nursing homes, hospice care, kind of similar. A question in the chat is, does it have to be hospital or private clinic? It doesn't matter. Really, like whatever that you have access to is great. Again, I was like never really asked about shadowing, is just kind of something that you should have. And again, like you just want a really, really good rec letter out of that. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about our non-clinical extracurricular activities. And just as a reminder, I'm Dana and I went to TCOM. And a lot of the stuff can sometimes overlap with your clinical activities. So your volunteering could also be related to healthcare. It could be unrelated to healthcare. Your clubs could be related to healthcare and same things. But one thing that's really important when I would focus on for this, especially when it comes to writing your applications, is that you want to make sure that you're really consistent with whatever you've chosen to do. Because if you are deciding to, I'm going to volunteer at this hospital for 10 hours, and then I'm going to jump over to this free clinic for 10 hours, and then I'm going to jump over to another place, you're not developing these strong experiences that you can write and talk about. You're not creating these bonds, and you might fill your hours on your application. You might have hundreds of hours, but I think for a lot of medical interviews and whenever you're writing, it's more important to have that longevity and that proof of commitment and that ability to understand what you've learned from this experience more than it is to just have check boxes on your list. One thing that I think about too, that's kind of clinical, but not necessarily for the medical domain, is that I worked in pharmacy as a pharmacy tech. And depending on how you write about that experience, it can make or break it for the person reading your application. So if you're writing about it as in like, this was a really draining experience or something like that, where I learned how to count pills, they're not going to be intrigued. But if you wrote about it in a way where it's like, I got to meet so many patients who still smiled every day, even though they had to take these really harmful medications, they're going to see you as someone who knows how to talk to people. Uh, Personally, for me, I think clubs and hobbies are a great way for you to stand out too. Like for my application, I talked about writing poetry a lot. That was something that was important for me. I wrote about like tatreez. I know how to like do Palestinian embroidery, so that was important to me. And it kind of makes you a more well-rounded person. Your clubs don't necessarily have to be healthcare related, but more often than not, they will be. But then it's also good to have options where you're showing that you are involved in your community, regardless of whether you are, whether it's medical related, that you care about the people around you outside of the context of medicine. And then lastly, you have research. So that could be your bench research or clinical research. So clinical would be like if you got involved in hospital research, like at UT Southwestern or at BUMC in downtown Dallas or things like that. And that kind of research, I personally think is way more interesting and would be really, really beneficial. But I think the easier one for you to get is bench research. And the easiest way to get that is just to email people on your campus or to talk to students in the grades above you and get them to connect you with whoever they did research with. Because more often than not, people might not just reply to your emails. And then it can also count as an elective. But I think the biggest part of research too is if you're putting hundreds of hours into research and you don't have a single poster, then it might not mean anything in the end. So I think with everything that you do, make sure that your hours translate to the results that you have. Yeah.
Can I add something really quick? If you look up kind of the TMDS application, it has sections for everything. And I think that's like a really good way to guide yourself in terms of like what activities you need and what you're missing. So there's going to be a section for research, there's going to be a section for like regular volunteering and then clinical volunteering. So make sure you have like at least something to put in each of these categories.
Yeah, and I completely forgot about that. I starred leadership for a reason. A lot of the time people will think about leadership as in, oh, I got chosen as like to be president of this organization. But if you search it up, TMDSAS is more lenient with their definition of leadership. So as long as you can take an experience and explain why you're like, say you are like a PLTL leader, that counts as like leadership. If you are a mentor for another student, that can sometimes count as leadership. If you end up being chosen as like lead tech at your pharmacy or at your like wherever you're working, that counts as leadership. So you don't need to let yourself be limited to the boxes. And then also, depending on what year you're in, you can like download a template of this application and just keep adding to it as you are gaining your experiences instead of just waiting till the end and being like, wait, what did I do these past 4 years?
Also, I did want to add on to that. So you don't need to feel limited to being involved in all the orgs on campus. So I personally was a commuter, so I never really wanted to stay until like 7, 8 p.m. where a lot of the meetings were. So I wasn't like involved in any orgs on campus, but I was still able to find volunteering and leadership in other ways. Like volunteering, I was involved in a food pantry near where I lived. And for leadership, I could find that in different ways. I was a Phil at UTD, and then also, like in my work, like Dana was saying earlier, I was in charge of certain tasks, so that also counts as leadership. So don't feel pressured that you have to be involved in all of these orgs, especially like for me, like I didn't really want to come back to campus that late in the day. So you're able to find volunteering and leadership in other ways. And then, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the personal statement and the interviews. So for the personal statement, this is the big question, why medicine? And for this, I would suggest and recommend that you start slightly early. I personally started the summer before I applied. So I applied May of my junior year. So I ended up starting with a rough draft my summer of my sophomore year. And the main thing with your personal statement is that you want to show, not tell. And what that means is that a lot of times what people might fall in the habit of doing is to just list out their resume, things that they did, but it's not necessarily like answering the question about why you want to be a doctor and why medicine specifically. So you need to show through your experiences why you want to pursue medicine. And by doing that, like you're also trying to create a narrative, create a story that flows rather than just like isolated paragraphs. So this paragraph, I did this opportunity. Next paragraph, same thing. And then for me, I personally watched a lot of videos from Med School HQ before writing my personal statement. I found it to be a really good resource because what he did was that he would go over applications of students that were admitted, but also students that were not admitted to med school. And he would go through the entire application and go through what the student did well and what they could have improved on. And then I think he also gives advice for like how to write your personal statement for interviews, and then also writing out the like activities and the leadership section of these applications. And so after you've submitted your primary and your secondary and you start getting those interviews, you want to be familiar with the different types. I know we briefly mentioned in the beginning that there's typically three main types, which is your traditional one-on-one interview speaking with like a faculty member, a doctor, a PhD. And then there's also the MMIs, and you kind of want to be familiar with what they're looking for in that. And then also for the group activity, there's some schools that will have one type of interview. There's some that will have all three. I've personally experienced both sides of the spectrum where I only had like the traditional one-on-one interview, but some schools had all three in the same day. So you definitely want to be familiar with what that school does. And then you also want to prepare some, that's supposed to mean like answers ahead of time. So with, I guess the general advice to, typically with like the one-on-one interviews is that you're trying to be genuine and make it more of a conversation, but you also do want to prepare some answers ahead of time. And that's going to be like your typical questions like tell me about yourself or why medicine. So you don't need to prepare every single question they might ask, but having like a good rough draft or like a blueprint of what points you want to hit on and you want to make sure that your interviewer learns about you is good to keep in mind. And then one also ask some questions at the end. It could be like one or two questions, something about the school or possibly about your interviewer, just to show them that you're actually interested in that school. Because if you don't ask a question, they might assume, oh, are they not interested in coming to the school? And then at the end, like send out thank you notes. So typically on your interview day, like either the person interviewing you will give you their contact email or number, or the school itself will be like, you can send thank you notes here. And then I just sent like a short thank you note, and then I mentioned something specific about our interview, and then that I was excited to like seeing them in the future and all that kind of stuff. And with like interviews, it's really a spectrum of what you could be asked about. I know for my UT Southwestern interview, for one of my interviews, the first one, the entire time we spoke about like different like states we had visited because I'd mentioned that in my application. So it's really like you really don't know what they're gonna ask. And I have a friend who talked about that they play games like Valorant and there was a specific rank on their application, and during their interview someone asked about that. So you really don't know what they're gonna ask about. But I guess like the general advice is to be authentic and try to make it a like engaging, fun conversation.
I'll add one more thing to what Layal is saying. Just like the night before your interview, if you guys search up on SDN, like the school, like there's like a huge database of pretty much everyone writes down what interview questions they got from the past year. Either do that or ask people that are applying in the same cycle as you, like some of your friends, they might have gotten an earlier interview, what questions they asked you, and just prepare some of those. Just like have little sticky, like I don't know if it's still virtual, but when I had virtual, I had a little sticky notes. Yeah, and then also it's like Layal said, it's super conversational. I was super scared. Almost like everyone is super chill. They just want to see that you're a normal person. So yeah.
Kind of like in a similar vein, make sure to review your own application before you go into interviews. Most of the questions aren't really like out of left field. It's already about stuff you've written. I remember I got asked a question about like some research that I had done, but I wasn't involved in it for a while, and I like hadn't kind of brushed up on that. And they asked me like a really specific question about like the number of patients or something. And so like just make sure you look over your own application too, so you're able to talk about the things you've done. Also for the personal statement, I think a lot of people that I've talked to, there's the perception that it has to be like very medical heavy. But I don't think, or at least for me, like that's not how I wrote mine. Like yes, it generally has to answer the question of why medicine, but I think if you bring out like things unique about you, like Donna said before, like if you have any hobbies and connecting that, I think it stands out more because then they're going to remember you as that person. So, like, I paint and I wrote about that. And like, they like asked me to show my paintings during my interview because that was something that I guess stood out in my application.
Yeah, I wanted to add about like a personal statement as well. I think a lot of people like want a million people to review their personal statement, but I think you need to make sure that when you are having other people review it, that it's not just like random other people. So like you'll have like people in your family and like friends review it, and they might be able to capture like, does this reflect who you are as a person? But they won't be able to comment on, is this what medical schools need to see? Okay, and then at the same time, you might show it to your school's HPAC, and I think some HPACs are really hypercritical. They're like, this doesn't sound like you're related to medicine at all, or whatever. Da, da, da. And we actually at my campus, we did like a whole personal statement exchange, and we were like being kind of guess whose personal statement is whose. Okay, it was kind of funny, but the point is, like, I read all their personal statements. The vast majority of us did not read, like maybe like the first like the first half, the first three-fourths of the thing had nothing to do with medicine. It had to do about who you are as a person. So just take everything everyone tells you with a grain of salt, because when you review that personal statement, you need to make sure it captures who you are as a person too.
Um, I wanted to segue back a bit, just on getting letters of recommendation. I think it's important to emphasize that you want those letters of recommendation that will stand out. Obviously, like not everybody has like very strong relationships, but that's because those relationships need to start early. A lot of my letter writers were like my either first or second year teachers that I then did research with. So for those of us that are early on in our academic career, go up to your professors afterwards and just talk about, like what's going on in your life and your aspirations. Ask them. Like I even worked, this was my bench research. I counted cobra scales for 2 years, and it was really interesting. And I learned a lot about evolutionary biology and the world. And I ended up getting a really meaningful letter of recommendation about who I'm as a person. So seek those meaningful relationships early, not just for application, but also for mentorship down the line. One of my letter writers is still one of my really close friends. So yeah, don't be afraid to go up to your professor and just try to make a friend, because I think professors are lonely anyway. They talk to like 200 people and no one talks back.
All right, we can go ahead and move on to the Q&A portion. Just in general, I was looking at a lot of the chat, and I think there were a lot of questions about how to sort specific activities that can belong into multiple categories. If there's any general blanket advice you all could offer about that, since I know there were specific examples that people were putting down, that it could help ease some worries.
If it's something that fits in two categories, I ended up putting it in the category that was kind of lacking. So a lot of my EMT work, I was doing it as a volunteer, but I already had a lot of like other volunteering hours as well. So I ended up just counting that as clinical hours.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you very much for your efforts. Jazakumullah khair for all of you. You're doing a great job already before becoming a doctor, helping a community and new students. So Allah give you success throughout your program. My question was that is there any specific area within the United States where chances are more brighter than not as much brighter or more not as tougher to get into?
I think I get the gist of this. So I think if you're in Texas, this is your best chance. By law, public schools in Texas have to Okay. I think I'm back. Okay. I'm muted. Sorry. So I think what I was saying, okay, yeah, your best chance is to stay in Texas. I think this is your best shot because 90%, first off, there's so many medical schools in Texas. I talked to some of my out-of-state friends and they'll have like two medical schools. We have like, I don't know, 14, 15 medical schools, number one. Number two, by law, 90% of the class has to be filled by Texas residents. And the 10% that do come in, they're like super, super talented people or they have some connection to Texas. So the chances are probably highest here. It's so much to the point that even out of state, your chances because you're Texan are actually lower. Like some schools, like it's pretty much a set rule that like a lot of the schools, like when they see a Texas resident, they're not even going to interview them oftentimes because they know like, okay, this person, if they get into Texas, they're not going to come here. Number one, because our tuition is like insanely low. Our out-of-state tuition is also cheaper than most people's in-state tuition. So a lot of people don't even spend resources on us. So if you're in Texas, just stay in Texas.
Thank you, Jazakumullah. If nobody having a question, I can ask another one. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think so. So I will follow with my second question if nobody has any question. So there are
Excuse
some.
me, but you cannot ask questions. Just write in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
So, do you have any advice to students applying with a lower GPA or MCAT than the median of a school? So, I think I can speak to this because I actually had a few mentees that fit this category, and one of them just got accepted this year. So, a big thing is when we say like lower GPA, lower MCAT, the question how low. I knew someone with a 498 MCAT that was trying to apply a few years ago, and I told her there's I mean, there was a chance that she'd get in, but I told her if you want to be able to cast a broader net, take a year or take however much time you need and really focus your efforts on the MCAT to have a better score so that you're not, you know, just wasting your time and money trying to apply when your chances are relatively low. So you really need to look at yourself, your statistics specifically, and the statistics of your desired program or area, whatnot. Like every student is different. And then even though Texas is kind of an umbrella of, oh, like public schools love Texas students, we have to take Texas students. That being said, I know some people that had a pretty good MCAT, pretty good GPA, and then they didn't matriculate because they were not good at their interviewing skills. So you really need to look at yourself and be honest with yourself. What about me maybe isn't strong enough at this point to become a medical student? And then attack those, like I was talking to Dr. Hana the other day about just kind of like those social skills. And there are courses that have existed for 50 years that you can kind of learn how to speak, public speaking, how to interact with people, how to make friends, stuff like that. That is really important for interviewing. And then for grades, I will say, like, if your GPA is pretty far below the median for those that matriculate, I would say to go take more classes. Like, I had one student that his GPA was a 2.9. It's because he was a biomedical engineering major, now applying to medical school. And, it was one of those cases where I was like, we need to boost this. So he was taking some hard classes mixed in with some easy classes, like virology, immunology, and then he also took a few interesting carpentry classes. But he did classes for 2 years and got his GPA up to a 3.6. So it is possible. So it really is a case by case basis. I will say, for the minutia of, oh, am I good enough to get in? Have a mentor, have them look at your application with you, and then start attacking those weaknesses so that we can make sure that you get in. That's kind of why the mentorship program exists. This is general advice, but when it comes to, oh, am I a strong enough applicant? Sit down with someone and make sure that before you apply, that you do have a good chance of getting in.
I wanted to add to that, depending on how low your MCAT score or how low your GPA is, there are some programs that try to help you remediate and push past whatever your undergrad scores were. And I think there's one at Lubbock. I'm not 100% sure. So Texas Tech Lubbock, I think has a 2-year master's program, which guarantees you admission to medical school if you complete it per what they ask for. I know at TCOM we have MedSci. MedSci doesn't have a guarantee, but I talk to the MedSci students all the time, and most of them have gotten in. So there are options where you can try to remediate your scores, and a lot of medical schools will start to look at that new score of your master's degree and completely overlook your undergrad as long as you've shown improvement. That's what matters more.
Someone asked about the difference between showing versus telling on applications. This is where we have to, even if we don't have that skill, learn to be storytellers. And you'll have to be kind of a storyteller your whole life as a physician, because that's how people understand things. At the end of the day, you can make a list of everything you've ever accomplished, but if you don't tell it in a story, then it doesn't have meaning. The same way we explain diagnoses to patients, we can use technical jargon, but if we don't explain it in terms that are meaningful to them, they don't understand. So this is a good, I would say, one thing I've always liked writing, but taking a little creative writing class online, or just kind of looking at some really strong essays and then trying to tell your own story. That first paragraph is a hook. And I tell people, throw the reader into a story, into your life, so they see these experiences through your eyes. And then try to pull things from the rest, it depends, however you want to write your personal statement. But I would say your most meaningful experience, try to tie that into the who I am, and then tie that all together in the last paragraph of, now this is who I'm going to be. So you're telling your story. Someone asked how much it costs in Texas for schools, so that varies based off of public versus private. I will say, though, I went to TCOM, which is a public school, and a lot of people think that no matter what happens in medical school, you're going to go in debt, you're going to take out loans at 9.1% interest. There's the economics of medical school right now is very bad. We actually want to do a whole talk just about the financials of getting into medical school and also living within your means while in medical school. And I also wanted to talk about just the existence of scholarships and programs that do help you in medical school. I was lucky, or I'm one of those people that I have kind of different circumstances. And so I didn't want to take out loans. I wanted to try to do it through scholarship. And I ended up, I had applied for, how to make medicine more eco-friendly, random scholarships online. They gave me $500 for essay contests, whatever. And I ended up only paying about $3,000 out of pocket per semester. TCOM historically is 13 grand for the first semester, which probably has increased since I was there, or since, in the past 4 years. 13 grand for the first semester with a tech package, and then every semester thereafter around $10,000. So it is expensive. Cost of living in that respective city also, it varies widely. I know someone that pays $900 a month for a 1-bed, 1-bath in Fort Worth, another person that pays $2,200 for a 2-bed, 1-bath in Fort Worth. So, it's really up to you and how much you're willing to hustle in order to keep that cost low. And I will say, keep that cost low. They don't talk about your financial wellness after medical school, but a lot of that goes into just minimizing your debt. Any debt that is under your name that affects your ability to buy a house, all that stuff. like we depend on our people, like our family, but you never know what happens. So it's better to set yourself up for success so that you're not dependent on other people. But we can talk about that later. But yeah, schools vary widely. I know another school, I have a friend going to a private school, TCU in Fort Worth, and I think their tuition is around 80 grand a year. So that's $80,000 just for tuition. So it varies widely. So if that matters to you and that's important to you, which it was important to me, I didn't apply to any private schools because I didn't want to have that burden, but I also set myself up GPA and MCAT. I created as much buffer as possible because I knew that was going to be a barrier for me going into medical school. So if that is a barrier for you, you need to be an above average applicant for each of those programs that you need to get into. So someone asked about crafting a school list for applicants with high stats but average extracurriculars. So like that's kind of another one of those situations where we really need to look at the application as a whole. Because when you say average, do you mean like average hours, like, or do we have enough like diversity for each of the categories? So again, that's a case by case basis. Like you can hold your application up to the averages for that specific program and those who matriculated into it. So I would say make your own spreadsheet with that data and then take a look and see, am I a good applicant for this school, this specific school?
Okay. I think so. Okay, talk about community college grades. I spoke about this yesterday, I think, with one of the doctors, but basically, I don't think any of us went to community college, but what I would say is this, that um, you should try your best to go to university, but it's not possible for everyone. I know one of the brightest people I know. He got multiple full ride scholarships to medical school. He just matched ophthalmology, which is a very competitive specialty, at one of the leading medical like schools in the nation. And he went to community college. So there's nothing wrong with community college. The only thing I would say is for people that take community college classes in high school. This is what screws over a lot of people, and they don't realize it, is that they'll take dual credit, especially places like Richland or Harmony. I know it's like a big deal over there. And they're in high school, so they don't really think anything of it. But they don't realize when you apply to medical school, you end up those grades also count. So when you apply for medical school, your GPA, they calculate it with pretty much all the college classes you've taken. So they'll do well in undergrad at university, but then they factor in that they end up getting a bunch of C's or B's in high school in those community college dual credit classes, and end up tanking their GPA well, like unexpectedly. So do that. Make sure if you're in high school or you know someone in high school that's taking dual credit, make sure you mention that to them. I took a few community college classes during the summers. So make sure also if you're taking in the summer, you also realize that you have to like pretty much ace those classes as well. I think I took calculus 2. I think I might have taken, no, I don't think I took physics, but I took calculus 2. And I had to do like work pretty hard to get that A. So.
I would say for your community college courses, I know that it's really tempting because it is so much cheaper. And that's the thing, like we say so much cheaper, but if you're looking to community college, and you probably do already qualify for some federal programs. I'm pretty sure UT Arlington, if they haven't started this yet, but they had talked about if a family makes under $80,000 per year, having free tuition specifically for students. So like these kinds of programs, even if they're not rolled out completely, you can talk to your financial advisor and see if you qualify to apply for those. And I'd say always apply for everything. You never know what you might catch, so just cast a very broad net in terms of money. But for community college, it's tempting because it's cheaper. Do not take your science and math courses in community college. If you want to and you feel like it's a cheaper avenue for you to take history and English, of course, and you don't have credit from undergrad, take those courses, or from, high school. I know some of us take AP classes, and if you have people that are in high school, please encourage them to take AP courses over dual credit, just because it is weighted more heavily. But if you are wanting to do community college, just stick to the humanities for community college. Your English, histories, psych, I guess, is technically safe to take there, but anything that is purely science or math, please take at a university.
I want to add to that if you did take AP credits and then you use that to like test out of your classes in undergrad, some medical schools will not count that as a prereq. So you need to make sure that you like say your dream medical school was like Baylor. I think Baylor requires you to have taken everything in like your undergrad. So you can't test out of those prereqs. So you make sure that you're informed about that before you make those decisions. Like for me personally, I didn't care about going to Baylor. So I was like, let me test out of this. But there are say if you like wanted to be a surgeon or you wanted to be, you know exactly where you're aiming for, or you want to go into those schools, make sure you double check and do that research early on. Because if you wait till the last minute, like the day before the application cycle opens up and you're looking at those requirements and you're realizing like, oh, every other school doesn't have this requirement, but this school does, it's too late to change it for this application cycle.
Yeah, just adding on to what Donna said, with the different, you should also look at, like she said, like look at the prereqs that they require. Like I remember I was searching up, most of the public schools pretty much have the same requirements, but I remember Baylor, they had like a ridiculous amount of humanities courses that you needed. So since I saw that early on, I ended up taking like, things that counted as humanities. They counted sociology, and I took like a bunch of psych classes. Those also counted. So make sure you, like, whatever school you kind of have an idea, like, okay, I would consider applying to this school. Make sure you look at their prereqs, especially if they're a private school. They're usually a little bit more weird in their terms of prereqs.
Someone asked about taking or applying without an MCAT. So if you're about to take your MCAT, but you plan to apply this cycle, so a lot of us had to do that actually during COVID. I was one of the COVID appliers, and yeah, I took my MCAT after I submitted my application because of all of our test dates. All of our test dates from like early March through April all just got canceled. So, and the only reason why I did do that is because I was scoring consistently above my target score on all my practice exams. So you need to just be honest with yourself. And if you are meeting your targets consistently, I would take the MCAT and also apply this cycle. But if you know that you're not meeting those targets and you're expecting yourself to meet those targets later on, I mean, we're getting pretty close to when you should be submitting your application. So just be honest with yourself. If you're not hitting those targets, I would wait, because you don't want to apply with a bad MCAT score and then have to then reapply. You want to make sure that the first time you apply is your best if you can.
I think something else to keep in mind is that it takes a while for your primary application to process. So just keeping that in mind in terms of like when you want to apply as well as like taking the MCAT. Because I know when I initially submitted, it took like 2 weeks to like fully process before I got secondaries, but I know later on in the application cycle, it might take longer just because they have so many people applying.
Yeah, and also taking the MCAT late, someone asked about July. So actually, medical school is rolling admissions. And what that means is like first come, first serve in terms of like, I'm not saying you have a better chance if you apply early. I can't attest to that, but I will say that they're trying to fill up their spots because at the end of the day, these institutions are designed to make money. So they want a full class of good applicants. So they're not going to wait and then, oh, we're like, that's the thing. Also, like interviews, like I got a lot of my interviews, or actually, I'm a weird case because I only applied to 2 schools. But like my friend, she got a lot of her interviews, like a wave of them in October, and then got another wave in December. So, in that, I do think that was affected by her applying a few weeks after everybody else. So, please have your application ready, and just be ready to plug and chug when TMD SAS opens. Like, do your secondaries within 2 weeks and start sending those out one by one. Just be quick about it because unfortunately that system does exist. It's a rolling admission system. It's a rolling interview awarding system. So just be expedient.
So this one, same way Ahmed asked about regards to reference letters. He's saying that you should have those planning to apply. Okay, yeah. So with that is that you just have to be very specific on. So I reached out to my letter writers about a semester before because I didn't want any chance of them like last minute canceling on me or saying they're too busy. So I reached out to all these people like in December and some of them, and then you also want to reach out to more people than there are because what happened to me was I reached out to this one guy. He said he would write it and everything, but he just ended up ghosting me. So just because I had more than one letter writer, like in the back of my mind, I had one plus. So I always asked this extra person, and then they ended up pulling through for me. So it's important for that. Um, yeah. How did I approach them? If you're asking them to write a letter, they should be someone who knows you well and they're comfortable with you, and say like, hey, um, I've really enjoyed my time doing this, this, and this, and I think you could speak well about my experiences. Would you be able to write me a strong letter of recommendation and kind of say, talking about my experiences doing this? Like, so what I did was I did the committee letter for UTD. So the committee letter, I think they give you five professors. You don't have to. I think the minimum is three, maximum is five. I just used up all five because I wanted different people to talk about different aspects. So I had one person from my research. I had one person from my volunteering, my hospice volunteering. I had one person that was a doctor, and two professors. So five is kind of overkill, but you want to have someone that can talk about different aspects. I think that's the most helpful. And by the time you ask them, they should know you. So it shouldn't be too hard to ask them.
Yeah,
I
another
also,
thing I didn't know when I was asking professors, but you need to have, I believe it's two science professors. Those tend to be really hard because it's generally really big classes, but in my experience, they'll send you like a form for you to fill out, and it's basically copy pasting your CV into it. So just so they have like more stuff to write about. But yeah, starting early and building relationships is key. And I would also say one of the five should be a doctor, ideally.
Yeah, I want to add to what Sana said because your classes are so big. The way to make connections with these professors is to TA for them. So in UTD, I don't know, she probably still does teach Dr. Shrikant. She's like the biggest, probably most popular bio teacher. I was a TA for her for like 2, 3 years, and then I became like a lead TA for her. So she counted as one of my professors, but she could speak write a very strong letter of recommendation because I had worked with her for so many years. Same thing with chemistry. The chemistry teacher, because he wrote it because I was a PLTL leader for many years. So not only was he my professor, but he's seen me over many years, lead PLTL and things like that. So if you try to go one extra step to get connected to them in some way, either doing TA or working with them through an organization, I think that would be really helpful for those science professors.
I also wanted to add that sometimes when you're volunteering or when you're working in a hospital or whatever you're doing, make sure that I think for me personally, there were 2 or 3 of my rec letters were people who came and offered it to me first. I didn't ask them for it. And those people, I think like one of those rec letters was like a cardiologist that I barely talked to. I only saw him in the hallway and he just came up to me and he was like, "You always have such a nice smile. So I want to write you a rec letter. When are you applying?" And that's how I got my rec letter. So I think also just be conscious of your character around everyone around you because especially in medicine, this is a lot of like networking. And you might not realize it now, but just to leave a good impression on everyone that you talk to is really key in making sure that you get like vouched for. So say for example, you're volunteering at UT Southwestern and you really want to get into that school. It's very important for you to make sure that you're not complaining about things where people can hear you or things like that, because that gets people in trouble all the time.
And on the, do you need two science professors or is it just recommended? When I applied, we had to have two science faculty. And is that the same for those that I guess are MS1s? It was required to have two science faculty. And for our shy friends, just because you didn't have a very, you're not like buddy buddy with your biochem professor and it's been a year, that doesn't mean that you can't like schedule a meeting, have a conversation, say, hey, your class really impacted me and I appreciate your teaching style. I'm about to apply to medical school. I want to become a doctor that helps people, and I would really appreciate it if you'd write me a letter of recommendation. And they're like, oh, I don't really know you too well, but I'd be happy to. Say, that's why I have my personal statement here for you, my CV, and here's also some of the other references that I have. If you want any other information about me and what kind of person I am, I can provide that to you. So just be willing to have that conversation. Just because you were shy as a first year doesn't mean that you didn't have an impactful relationship with that professor. So it's never too late. I'm in a DO program, and that I do think everything is program specific. I think that the allopathic versus osteopathic, that I mean, I one of my good friends just matched surgery, and another one matched anesthesia. Actually, we had a lot. We had I think 9 anesthesia matches for my class this year. It really just depends on you as an applicant. I do think that more so than anything, it like kind of across the board, we look at parameters that are standardized. Like the MCAT is extremely important for us. Step one, or well, step one's pass fail, but taking step one if you're a DO is important. Scoring well on step two is important for everyone because those are the only standardized parameters that we have to look at. So if you are thinking of applying to a DO school, I would also look at that school, look at your allopathic schools, like the culture at each institution. Will they be able to support me in the ways that I need? Like you really need to do a deep dive. Like don't look at like blanket statements, oh, all schools are like this. Anyone who ever gives you a blanket statement is someone that was too lazy to do their own research. So please do your own research.
I want to add to that too, because I also go to TCOM, and TCOM was personally my first choice medical school just because I like know the environment here and I really enjoy it. And then also we have like a really big Muslim population. But it like additional to that, I know exactly that I'm not the kind of person who wants to go into surgery. I don't want to do dermatology. I'm a very primary care focused kind of person. And so I know that this school has the resources for me to accomplish my goals. And if you know what you want to do right now, make sure that you do research that whatever schools that you're applying to align with the kinds of goals you're trying to accomplish. Especially like TCOM is like one of the higher ranked DO schools, but if you match into like for example, I mean I can't think of a school off the top of my head, but a different DO school, but you really, really, really want to do dermatology, that might be really difficult for you to achieve, especially with like the way the match goes. So go ahead and like do some research about how that works out for each school. I know our match is really good for a DO school, but other DO schools don't have that kind of environment.
Like Dana said, this is for those that are closer to applying. So Texas has a matching system even for like going into medical school. Out of state, they don't. Like whatever you get accepted, you can pick wherever you want. So what I did is kind of had an idea that what kind of specialty I wanted to go into. So then when I was ranking schools to go to, I would look at their match list for the past few years and see how people matched, where they matched, what specialties they matched, and saw if they were matching well into the specialty that I wanted to go into or was thinking about going into. Another way is to look if they have a home department. So let's say you want to go into ophthalmology, right? If your school doesn't have an ophthalmology department, it becomes very difficult for you because number one, you won't have any research, you won't have any mentors, you can't even shadow ophthalmology. So a lot of those people end up doing like a research year or a gap year to go to a school that does have those departments. So make sure that if you are applying closer to those ranking dates, and you know that you want to go into something a little bit more competitive or like a more like niche field, make sure you check out the school if they have good support for students there, if they have a department, and if they match into that specialty well.
And then also to add to that, because I completely forgot about this, I think it's important to look at how long that medical school has been open to, because some medical schools have not graduated a single class or have only graduated one class, and that's not necessarily comparable to a medical school that's been open for such a long time. And so it's really important to have that. And then if you have the opportunity to talk to students that go to different schools, you can ask them how they because the website can say a lot of things about how we have this support, we do this, but talking to different students might be like, I don't feel like I was supported. So that's also important. Talking about length of program, I think all medical schools are usually 4 years, but there are certain options that are like, if you wanted to graduate only family med, that you could do 3 years. So that I know Lubbock has that, but most of the time it's 4 years here.
In terms of the difference between allopathic and osteopathic training, if you do go to a DO school, you'll complete about 300 hours of like in-class manipulative medicine training in addition to all the same coursework. So your first 2 years will have a few more time commitments that will take you out of your study bubble because you'll be doing hands-on OMT medicine. So that's kind of, I guess, in terms of like difference of program. But for exams, I mean, some people do not take step 1 and step 2, and that is a mistake. I know people who truly limited their options when it came to interview time. I know I have a good friend of mine scored a 265 on step 2 and ended up getting less interviews than me, and I scored a little bit below him. Just because I do believe he didn't take step 1, and that was the reason why he had that door shut. Because a lot of programs have a system that is automated. So, okay, they took this exam, they scored about at least this high, but this is in our first wave of interviews. They will be put into the first wave of interviews. So just make sure that you're fitting those parameters. You know, I know that's really like a tough thing to think about down the line, but if you're going to go to a DO school, you're not going to have MBME style practice materials from day 1. So it's your job to be preparing for step 1, step 2 in your own time, getting used to the question style because the material is the same. So you'll have a little bit more work. That is the truth. But at the end of the day, like there's a lot of factors that go into it. I'm very grateful for my education and my training, and I had amazing, very supportive faculty. So once again, do your research, look at that program, talk to people that are currently in it, and decide if it's a good fit for you.
Thank you so much to our panelists for helping out with this Q&A session. If anyone else does have any more questions, feel free to email us at our AMWPA email that we will put in the chat, or you can also reach out to these panelists, some of which have provided their contact information in the chat. If they could do so again, that would be great. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to attend this program again, and we look forward to seeing you all at our AMWPA events of the future.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for a beautiful PowerPoint presentation.